This will be led by Steve Sarsfield with Vertica, along with some great panelists from Shell, Regions Bank, and Novartis. They'll be talking to us today about creating a data driven culture and making data the basis of organizational decision making. So I'm going to introduce Steve and allow everyone to join us here on the virtual stage before I hand the mic over. Steve, a little bit about Steve. He is a thought leader and author at Vertica, where he is a member of the partners team. His experience in the industry includes former positions at IBM, Talent, and Cambridge Semantics, and he's also the author of the book, The Data Governance Imperative, which discusses the topic of how business and IT can better work together to address business challenges. With that, Steve, I'm going to hand you the mic so you can lead us into this discussion.
All right. Thank you, Charlene. Appreciate it very much. Hopefully everyone can hear me. I think I'm on, so that's great. As was mentioned, my name is Steve Sarsfield. Very happy to be here. Very excited about this panel. Charles and Solomon and Henry, this is great to have you. I think we have, let's see here. I just want to make sure we have everyone on board. Aparna, thank you as well for joining the panel. So that's great. So the topic today is creating a data-driven culture and making data the basis of organizational decision making. And I think very often what happens when you're trying to do that is the obstacles in creating a data-driven culture aren't really technical, they're more cultural. And so that's what I want this panel to talk about to a large degree, is just sort of the cultural things that need to happen when you want to drive that data-driven culture. I think we're really interested in what strategies are being employed to make everyone data-driven, and how to make data-driven culture normal within your organization, how to open people's mind about the value of data within an organization. And a very interesting thing about our panelists, they come from across the industry. So we're giving banking and pharma and oil and gas, all a chance here to talk specifically about, what some of their challenges are with data. So as for me, I work for data. I work for a company called Vertica. Just a real quick thing on what Vertica is. Vertica is a highly scalable data warehouse. So if you're having scaling problems and you're having a hard time solving it, so you've got, 50 terabytes an hour, let's say you got 3,000 business users hitting up against the data warehouse, there are very few solutions on the market that can handle that kind of workload. So Vertica can handle that. And so I'd be happy to talk to anyone about that. As mentioned, I also wrote this book called The Data Governance Imperative. And that's a book exactly about this topic. It's about how you get business users and IT users to work together, and how do you get all parts of the company to work together, really, when it comes down to it. So I think first thing we'll do, we'll go around the room maybe and just do introductions of the panel. This is a panel, not just me talking. So let's see here. Who do we start with? Let's start with Solomon.
Good afternoon, Steve. Glad to be on this panel and glad to meet you all. So as we talk about the, our organization from financial services, understanding the data maturity, growing with growing trends and keeping up with everything else, and as an enterprise, moving towards data maturity. I guess we have a similar challenges like any other big enterprises have, with a large, technology core line of business, and then serving all the business units as independent business units. So creating a common data framework as much as possible, right? Every line of business has its own, specialized data that they serve their own business units. Again, there's a corporate common data. So kind of bringing them together as a synergy in terms of enterprise value, not creating, silos of data everywhere. That's a key for maturity. And then once you bring them together, understanding from different areas of data coming together, creating a common language, kind of a, business semantics or data glossary or business, all this, what is available in the whole enterprise data catalog, things like that, and what that means to all these people who are serving as data, playing different roles of using data right now. Whether you're a GDO for a group, or you're a lead data steward, or data steward and subject matter expert, or you're a data citizen just using so different roles in the organization, and understanding the available data, and making accessible to the right people or the right amount of data, because we work in a very highly governed framework, and then make sure that we have process in place to protect the data, but not impeding any progress. So this is all a catch-22 situation where you want data now, and then you have to pass hoops and loops to get to a point where you can clean up and serve the data in a more consumable format. So as we are growing, now I've listened to a global data officer IBM this morning of like, that's exactly what everybody's going towards, is kind of a more federated data, not traditional warehouses moving data from one place to another place reporting, but as we are maturing to data reporting to more like augmented or cognitive or all this kind of analytics enable our organization, as we can move quick, our business can make quick decisions as the data comes in, right? We don't have a luxury of sitting out 48 hours and make decisions, but we want data now. And how you make that possible, working with all these different analytics environments that we use around the enterprise. So that's a challenge. So we are in our organization, we have established all this framework a couple of years ago. I've been maturing, and I'm serving along with the data council to make sure we're doing our part on the data assessment, whether we are identifying critical data elements and creating all this processes and policies, and defining quality, what is quality, and defining SLAs and things like that. So we're doing our part, playing the role in the bigger enterprise cycle to mature our data and make it available to all the applications, anybody who's using the data. And we're looking at more enterprise systems, whether it's Salesforce and all these things coming into play. Now the game is changing a little bit, where this with these applications can do a lot more stuff instead of our traditional type of businesses. So we're adapting, we're changing, we're learning, and we're moving quickly as opposed to in the previous years. So it's continuous learning and continuous improvement process.
Yeah, Solomon, I mean, that's great. You may have jumped ahead a little bit on the questionnaire, really, but yeah, what I really wanted to know is a little bit about your background, right? So your wealth management and data analytics and data governance for Regions Bank, right? So you're kind of our banking expert on this panel, right? And there's probably some specific things around banking that we can talk about in the next round, but you touched a little bit on the maturity, and that's great. So, I definitely want to hear that. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. Charles, what about you? I know that you're from Shell, so you're oil and gas industry. So, tell me a little bit about what's going on in your background.
Yeah, thanks for joining this panel and everyone. So, to be honest, we try to get away from oil and gas. We try.
Oh, do you? Okay.
So that's the one. The new energy pick a bigger roles, right? So I'm the chief data officer for trading and supply. So trading and supply almost like integrated from upstream, downstream, and all the way to the marketing. So I'm based in Houston, and being in this role over 3 years, I have seen what's the starting point, and it's getting to the maturity, as Solomon says. It's a journey. So that's everything we talk about is technology, process, people. People is always the number one, which is a culture, right? So if you look at our data is in the middle of this triangle.
Yeah, I know there's a lot of process in the energy field, right? Especially, sort of all the distribution channels that happen and so on. So, maybe we can talk about that as the panel goes on here. So that's great. I'm glad you're here. Thank you, Charles. And Aparna, what about you?
Thanks, Steve. I'm happy and honored to be here. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. This is Aparna Mangari. I'm heading data science and analytical team for patient safety function for Novartis. It's a pharmaceutical industry. Our vision is to become the valued and trusted medicines company with powered by data and digital, and go big on data and digital is one of the strategic priorities. Keeping this on to spark on, keeping this in view and to spark on the data and digital revolution, we have established enterprise-wide program to establish the data strategy and to have a unique governance across the organization. And more we will be talking in.
Yeah, I want to hear more about that, about the strategy that you've established for sure. So let me just share one slide, if you don't mind. And we only have one slide for this presentation, so it's not a big presentation. Hopefully you can see this all right. So I want to start with this, and this is really the introduction, I think, the challenge of this conference. The people who attend this conference, these are the challenges they face, right? It's always about people, processes, and technology. And then if you kind of break down each of those areas, the people, the process, and technology, you're thinking about a lot of things. So in the people front, you're thinking about how do I serve diverse analytics across multiple people who some don't know technical, some people know SQL, some people know Python, and so on. How do I deal with change management? So when my company grows or shrinks, how do I deal with that? So there's the people aspect of it. A lot to do there for a CDO. Secondarily, there's the process, and that's a lot about handling data and the data quality and metadata management, all of those things. Now, I think those two areas really don't change much. I've been in this business for 20 years plus, right? And people and processes always need sort of the same thing, right? But the technology, that changes quite a bit. And so, you're also thinking about, well, do I move everything to cloud? Do I use containers? What kind of strategies do I have around this? So I kind of frame this as the business problem that CDOs have. Also, Gartner agrees to some degree. So they're saying that the chief data officer's mission has shifted from, mitigating risk to one of creating business value. One of the nice statements I heard in the keynote from Interpol was that there are three things that matter, right? Top line, bottom line, compliance. And I like to think of it as revenue efficiency and compliance, but same sort of thing, right? Can I make more money? Can I be more cost effective? And can I be more compliant? And so everything we do sort of has to touch upon some of those challenges. So I guess we can go around the room. Maybe Solomon, you can talk a little bit about, what kind of things stand out here in this chart, and what kind of things are you facing in your company?
Yeah, Steve. I think a combination of all this, right? Just like any other enterprise, like I said. People I talked about, sorry to jump ahead in the previous question. I was, I think you meant to ask me about my background in financial services. And I have 25 years of IT experience and mostly 15 years on the data analytics side. So now my role here is to enable data analytics and governance for wealth management line of business with Regions Bank. So as I'm playing my role with the enterprise governance team, or looking at other enterprise systems to enable our businesses with quick and ready data. So all these things will come into play, right? People, I touched on that a little bit about developing a culture. I like Interpol, what he said this morning, when you have AI or ML, some things that you're adopting as a new data maturity cycles, it's impossible to replace everybody. So you got to bring in some leaders, 10% of them maybe, and then you start upskilling or reskilling some of the existing folks to make sure they adapt to the new environment. So we are going through the training programs ourselves to make sure the new things are, people are able to get on board with the new developments. That's about the people. So governance process is a big deal, and especially in finance when it comes to a risk and regulatory type of environment, whether the risk is coming in reputational or what do you call model risk or anything like that, compliance, regulatory, those kind of things. We got to have strict processes around, and sometimes I feel like we have too many processes that we can't move fast enough, but that's the nature of business. We got to keep up with all the processes to make sure we comply and be able to serve our customers more faster or changing with the needs of customers. Technology is the backbone to enable all this, right? So I guess, the new things that are coming into play, how do we how do we quickly move into adapt or transform into new available technologies, making ourselves in a position of not data silos or all the traditional type of data we've been using, but how quickly can we move to the next available technology in 6 months. So we are we are working with the new available technologies. I worked in previous financial services in my previous role, that we completely transformed everything to a cloud enabled technology, whether it's data or analytics or integration, everything into the cloud. So it was so easy. But here, I think we're trying to make those maturity cycles. We have most of our systems are on-prem, so we are trying to take that leap as an enterprise to a cloud. Starting with some things like Salesforce, we have some cloud enablements, but we are looking at other opportunities to go to cloud. So once we make the step, and then the sky will be the limit. So as we are doing some core modernization for the next 3 to 5 years, so we're ongoing, and our CIO is one of the best CIOs. She's recognized for in the Forbes this year, best innovator, things like that. So ever since she came on board for the past 3 years, she's changed a lot of things. Just looking at the trends, everything that's disrupting or enabling or accelerating, everything that we are staying on tune with technology and things like that. So I guess my short answer is a combination of everything.
Yeah, that makes sense. And yeah, I hear different things about the cloud. People are moving slowly to the cloud. Most folks will probably have a hybrid environment for the cloud in terms of that technology for years to come, from what I hear. So I'm not sure 100% of I'm not sure all business are 100% cloud yet, but that's an interesting thing that's happening. I've even heard stories where folks are kind of coming back from the cloud, so they're repatriating data. So pretty interesting transition that's happening there. Charles, one thing I want to ask you about is, one of the topics on this slide that always comes up is data quality and data governance. And I don't know, are you using any techniques about helping the business understand how important data quality is and data governance and all of that? Can you talk about that?
Yeah, of course. So this is actually a very comprehensive map, right? So as Solomon said, everything's relevant. Sometimes you say where you started. So you actually pick up two pretty big. One is governance and data quality. So really we try to drive it from business value. And technology one is just always evolving. And you compare with 10 years and now, even 2 years and now, there's lots of technology is getting more innovative, right? But really the business worry about, or what business focus on, is the business value. So the way we try to do is from business talk about data quality is I'm not going to talk about very generic data quality. Basically, I say that what business problem you try to solve. For example, you talk on compliance, right? Unfortunately, compliance is like tax, just one of the our life, and to us it just easy say, keep us out of jail. So the one they have a compliance problem, the first question I say, what data problem causing you? So I give you one example. For example, for trading and supply, we have a counterparty, basically like a customer data. So if you don't know them, if you're trading with them under sanction, you will have a problem. So now they talk about is very specific. Okay, so if this data quality has a problem, who is owning that data? So now they understand, okay, well, I need to figure out, who is owning data, who is control the data standard. You talk on data governance. So I think that those two major areas of data governance, data quality has to be anchoring on those business problems. So then you start with very specific, then they are open to talk about what problem they are dealing with, how data can help them, and also how can measure them. So meanwhile, and I think Solomon mentioned earlier, is a silo. The data silo, I think, is a tremendous problem. But people doesn't see the silo if they are in the silo, right? So that's the way also governance help is because governance is looking for the forest, not a tree. So to answer the question, I think this really need to be sponsor support by the business problem and be very specific, but also have a future vision to cut across, which is a very horizontal, not silo or vertical.
Yeah, it's interesting. I thought I heard you say that sort of data quality, data governance, obviously data governance, but data quality is really about it's data ownership. So that's a people problem. It's sort of the flow of the data and how the data gets in, and that's a process problem. And is it a technology problem? I guess I'll kind of throw that back at you, Charles. Is it all three, or is it, mostly a people and process problem?
I would think maybe there's a controversy. I was always a people process problem, but technology is enabler. So without technology, the other two won't work. But even you have the best technology, if you don't get a people process to sort out, you're just getting a shining widget and nobody uses it.
Yeah, I think what I hear from my practice is a lot of folks sort of like they'll load some data into a database and they'll query it, sort of the old ELT versus ETL, right? So I'll load data in, I'll run some queries against it to make sure the data quality is good, and then if it isn't, then there's some process I have to fix, right? So I think maybe that's where the technology comes in. So Aparna, you're in the pharma industry. We've also at the same time we're trying to solve all of these CDO challenges. We've had COVID, and we've had more time at home, and we've had sort of this disconnection of people within our companies. So I don't know. Does it make it more difficult to create a data-driven culture in light of COVID and everyone at home? What do you think about that?
Thanks for that question, Steve. I think in my perspective, it is yes and no. The reason being the pandemic situation has impacted most of the associates and families, and across the world, right? My heart goes with that. But prior to COVID also, most of the industries have realized the power of the data as a strategic asset, and they have embarked the journey to foster and nurture the data-driven culture. Good. And what COVID has done is it made it clear that it is inevitable, right? It is not just an option for us to have, but it is inevitable. Just hypothetically, let us assume pharmaceutical industries are with very rich data. And if this data was verified, that it is very clean and linked, then we could have harnessed this wealth to address many of the problems which pandemics is throwing at us, right? Maybe we could have assessed efficiently, studied about this new virus or the mutants, or we could have built innovative medicines in much shorter span of time, or we could have streamlined our operations to bring these medicines to the patients in a faster sense. Yeah. So in short, maybe we could have avoided this pandemic situation. But nonetheless, I think organizations have to take certain measures to enable remote working and to ensure we foster the data-driven culture. Some of the aspects could be reinforcing ethical usage of the data on the data privacy, data integrity, etc. And accelerate democratization of the data with having specific controls in place, access controls, data security, and data protection. And the third, but not least, is building capabilities in terms of technology, process, and people. And upskilling and reskilling our people is very important to become the good data citizens. So these are my views on that. Yeah.
That's great. Thanks, Aparna. Yeah, and I kind of think democratization of data is kind of a double-edged sword, right? And you must have a lot of regulations in your industry about, I can share all of this data, I can give access to a lot of people for this data. But on the other hand, I have some industry-specific regulations that I have to deal with, right, when I democratize it. So do you find that to be true, that, it's a double-edged sword, if you will?
Yes, Steve, sorry, I did not think it was. Yeah, I totally agree with that, right? Without having the proper controls, giving access to the data would have more risk than more advantage, I have to say.
Does anyone else on the panel, is there, we always talk about data democratization, but then, you sort of are held back by that whole thing around regulation and PII. Anyone else have anything to comment on that, on PII? Maybe Charles or Solomon? No?
Yeah, I can say a little bit about, of course, the banking, we have strict regulation about PII data. So at the same time, we have to democratize the data so the users can use the data to make business decisions, at the same time safeguard the data to not fall in the wrong hands. So some of the things, traditionally people have been using spreadsheets or passing them around everywhere, making copies or whatnot. So we can, databases now have, we can secure databases based on private, fields and things like that, encryption or certain types of fields. But if you start distributing these copies in terms of Excels or whatever, then we also have, some types of tools to monitor the network where the sensitive data is going around. So I think it's a double-edged sword, like you said, Steve, kind of safeguarding the data to make sure the right people get it to make those decisions, and not when you, well, this poses a very typical challenge about, okay, unless you if you want to make centralized repository, then it makes it efficient for the systems to kind of move the data into that central place. When you talk about federated or different types of data sources you can use at the same time, then you're making multiple copies of, or letting the data live in multiple levels. So there is, at the end of the day, what we have to do is have strict policies on PCI secure encryption or governance at rest or at motion, things like that, and also be able to serve the users with this information, and also classify based on the rules. That rules will define what type of data do you need to make those decisions, right? You don't need the whole 9-digit social security number. Can you live with the last four? Or can you live with the last four of the account numbers, or some kinds of things like that, when it's a more general population is accessing the data. So I guess with our processes are helping us to define those things and make sure we follow them to secure our data.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think a lot of technology companies are building in that encryption capability, whether it's encrypted, moving throughout the network, or whether it's encrypted on when it's on premise, when it's sitting, and then all of the LDAP stuff and all of the access controls. Those are certainly important as well. We've got some open source projects like Kerberos, right, that we can encrypt the data with as well. So those are all really important technologies that are coming around it. I see you're shaking your head, Aparna. Yeah, you agree?
Yes, I just wanted to add one more point here, and it is very important for us to adhere to the different data privacy policies, right? When it comes to privacy policies, it is different for regulations at different country level. So it is based on that, it is very important that PII data is shared with the others, like HIPAA. We have to consider GDPR, HIPAA, PMDA, etc.
Yeah, so I guess what I wanted to ask next, and we've sort of touched on these, maybe we can just kind of recap a little bit. But for you, Aparna, so you're in life sciences and pharma. Are there specific challenges in that area that you have to face? I'm just curious about what kind of things that you face that's different maybe than some of the other industries that are out there.
So first thing I would like to acknowledge some of the points were touched by Alex in one of the earlier sessions. Why the associates or people shy away taking the data driven results, right? And just to add a couple of additions from pharma industry. As pharma is heavily regulated, and we were just talking about the different regulations from different countries, etc. And but regulations to build, adopt, and usage of the next gen solutions like data science and AI is not yet clear. And that slows down everything, right? The transformation to become the insight driven. But how can we use this, whatever insights we are gathering or from this data, how to use it. This entirely slows down the transformation. The other the challenge which we have faced, and I think it has slightly touched based by Charles earlier, is breaking down the silos, right? Treating the data asset as organization, data as organizational asset rather than as a department or functional asset is very important. And in order to address that only, we have set up this enterprise program, which enables clear data ownership and to have a harmonized data governance in place where organization can follow. And we are moving away from the federated approach to a hybrid approach where we have both functions and organizations come together to define and execute the data governance.
So sorry, I didn't quite catch this. So you're moving away from federated and toward?
To the hybrid approach.
Okay.
So where we have so where we have both central as well as functional level data governance.
Okay. Yeah, that's good. I mean, there's always that sort of discussion about, do I try to connect up all the data or do I move it in one place? And it sounds like you're sort of like doing a little bit of both there. That's great. Charles, in energy, what's going on there? Any specific considerations in energy?
Yeah, I like to follow up the previous one, talk about those data privacy, because in the trading side we're also very highly regulated. Yeah. But sometimes I think I just bucketize or maybe call the data classification. So some data is very highly sensitive, like a social security number, you have to guard it. Sometimes probably not. But the people have the tendency is that if I think there's one of those, another 10 or 9 will be guarded the same way. So guarding the data is very expensive. That's against the data democracy, right? So the approach you really try to find out is what is the most sensitive data. You kind of try to extract that. But the other one is maybe everybody, like a market data, everybody can get it Google, right? So why you want to put that 3 or 4 or 5 times? So you try to getting those kind of information, then you will find out really very sensitive data, at least from energy side, not that many, but of course there's a very important one. So then when you have using the technology, because the technology you can tell now, access is getting very difficult, especially you have an aggregate data. So sometimes that's when you ask about technology. So that's played a big role. So early on, everybody understand the role base, right? Nowadays, it's very difficult to define a role because you have a data A plus data B plus data C. You really don't know aggregated risk. So now you have to implement some policy. You have to implement some kind of a track and tracing. So you want to safeguard those most important data, but let the other data is be more DIY, let people get to it. And this is also going back to the data governance side, going back, right? In order to figure out which one is the most important one, you don't want to ask the street to say, hey, what do you think, right? You need to find out who can make that decision. Who will go to jail if that doesn't work? I can give you one example. Yeah. One of the traders, they say, oh, if I leave that data out, I will go to jail. For that case, I want to keep that data in my database or spreadsheet. I say, okay, that's maybe not the best way to do it because your spreadsheet also has some security issues. So if I can guarantee you, if you put on a data lake, you will have the same rigorous monitoring, auditing. Will you be willing to do that, right? That's going back to the Aparna, you're talking about those data no longer belong to one department organization. The data is an enterprise data. But in order to get them off the hook, technology or the process or people need to understand is those data still will be safeguarded if it's not better than original has been done.
Yeah, it's interesting that you're rating your data to a certain extent. And, I remember back in the MDM days, we used to say, well, here's the most current data, here's the most trusted data, here's data that's, needs to be protected, right? So are you, any of you, are you doing, maybe Charles, start with you, are you doing any of that where you're sort of rating the quality and rating other aspects as part of the metadata that you keep around?
Yeah, so maybe I go a quick response thing that the other panelists chime in as well. So yeah. Those are the data classifications. So you want to figure out what is the most confidential, what's confidential, or what is like a general and be used. So you do those kind of classification, be able to only and safeguard when you really need it.
You have a lot to worry about. Great. Okay, perfect. Well, let's see. So we haven't touched Solomon. So in banking, any specific challenges we haven't mentioned yet?
Oh, I think I covered every aspect, Steve. But
yeah.
going back to Charles' comment about classification of data, I think we also have something called a critical data elements when we build a dictionary, as opposed to doing the general population and everything. So we identify critical data elements in every business data sources, and make sure identify the sensitive information and treat them accordingly. Just to add that point.
Okay, so yeah, I mean, this really touches on another question, and I'll throw this out to the group if anyone wants to answer it. So, there is in an organization, and most organizations now, sort of a wider group of people who need analytics. It could be a manager, it could be a business user, it could be dashboard users, data scientists, business analysts who are running SQL or Python. So, have you guys done any work around finding continuity in these groups? I know in a lot of organizations now, it's sort of like separate groups, right? Data scientists are separate from business analysts. And so is there any need to bring these groups together? I see, Aparna, you're shaking your head. Yeah, can you tell me about what's happening there?
Yeah, well, maybe I can throw some light of how we are handling at Novartis, Steve. So as part of this enterprise program, right, we are assessing what are the skill sets which we have currently in organization, and defining the new operating model, right? For example, data engineering role can be in technology as well as business units, and similarly to the data analyst role also. So that is where, based on what are the new skills which are required for the future, right, we are defining the new operating model and executing it. So.
Gotcha. Yeah. Okay, cool. Charles or Solomon, do you have any comment on sort of bringing together different groups of people in the organization, or are they still separate within your organization?
For me, I can say something about our organization here. We have a chief data analytics office, and we have a specialized set of people who are specialized skills, hard coders, or do a lot of those things as data science, AI, ML, those kind of initiatives, which they can apply those models across enterprise to every business units. And we also have business units, kind of what you call more skilled people in the business domains, where you don't have to do heavy coding, but there are tools available nowadays to just do some predictive analytics. So I think the roles kind of that's not confined to any department. I think our objective is, if you can do it without the help of technology, go ahead and do it, as long as you can serve your business unit, right? It doesn't have to be a specialized skill, specialized area of serving everybody, because it's difficult for a small group to, help all the organizational units to implement these programs. So it's a combination of both. I think I would say specialized, team, and then you have other people who are leveraging, teaming up with these teams to do their projects.
I'm curious from the panel. I know that a lot of this is about communication and talking, IT and business kind of talking together. Have you found the need to sort of get a little more skilled in like presentation, like soft skills, right? Presentation, marketing, communication. Have any of you taken any? I don't know. I used to, back in the day, I took Dale Carnegie, which is a great course to take. But have you read any books? Maybe some tips on how to better communicate across the enterprise. Charles, maybe we'll start with you. Any comments on that?
Yeah, communication is the number one skill set, so regardless. So if you cannot communicate, you cannot communicate business value, technology implementation. So definitely is communication is the key for any resource and the talents that we're looking for. And also another one is, especially currently, is a data, business, and technology all commingled together. So you want to look at some multi-talent. So the people understand the business, only not just talking bits and bytes. On the other side, the business also understand technology. So I do want to comment out of the earlier question regarding the data democracy. So the vision will be, we want to have everyone is a data citizen, right? but that's a long way to go, because in order to be a data citizen, the data has to be there ready for you to consume. By this point, we don't have those good data quality. People even don't know how to find the data. When they find the data, they don't trust data. They download to the spreadsheet, do its own VLOOKUP. So that's why I think a two-sided of it. We want to make sure technology process while getting those data ready. Then we can talk about data democracy. The people will be able to getting those data, which are trusted, and do their decision making and the profit creation.
Well, that's an interesting prospect. So, giving people access to the data and democratizing the data. I've heard a lot of CDOs talk about, setting up sandboxes for everything, right? And really promoting the sandbox as a place to go. And then maybe also at the same time, you're putting your data in the sandbox, you're saying, this data is okay, this data is really good, this data is not, not so good. So, I guess sandboxes are the way to go. Is that a strategy that you have, Charles, or how do you get people access to the data?
No, what we try to do is we try to come up with data like a services. So, and definitely we have those data lake, they have the raw space that people can just have it, but we don't want the data copied all over the place, right? So when they get the data, they can analyze data, but they don't need to, second thought about it. How good is that data, and where data coming from? So that's, I think, all the other technology regarding the data lineages talked about earlier, session and the data catalogs. All those technology will help to make sure the data is with quality and trusted.
Aparna, do you give a sandbox, or do you have anything available for folks to sort of like have a catalog of data?
Yeah. We follow this approach, Steve. So we use the sandbox concept where we encrypt the data privacy data, and remaining data is published. But there is a challenge. We, especially for data science solutions, right? It is not useful that much. So what we have started doing is we started using the publicly available data. So we can use it to its potential, as well as because in order to see the patterns or insights, it's very important that we have data accuracy. And that is where we are using this dual approach, where to ingest the company data by encrypting the data privacy fields, and using more of the publicly available data to build our data science models, etc.
Well, oh yeah, publicly available data and monetization of the data you have, that's a whole nother subject, and we only have a minute left. So I'm going to give Solomon the final word on that. What about you? What kind of techniques do you use for sandboxing and democratizing your data?
In the current environment, Steve, we don't have any sandboxes. We have a data lake that's majority of the data goes into the big data lake, and then we augment the data with several different sources. But in the previous environment that I worked with the other financial institution, we implemented a test data management solution similar to the silos, where we can scramble the data and push it to their own databases so they can play along with the data. So we use all the scrambling techniques, encryption techniques. So it almost looks like a production data, but they can build everything using that data.
I've heard of CDOs even saying that telling their business users that it is production data, even though it's in a sandbox. So, yeah, pretty interesting. Well, I think that's it. I want to wrap it up. I think we have. No, we're up against the time, so I appreciate it. Charlene, I don't know if you want to come back in and close us out.
Yes, we are at time. Thank you guys so much. Thank you for sharing.